Hello, History of St. Louis, and welcome to the second lesson of the unit. Today we tackle the fun topic of the founding of St. Louis. Again, you're going to want to take notes on this, but this time you should have a prepared note page that is laid out that follows this presentation perfectly so that you can hit notes wherever they are located on your note page. So make sure you have that either manually or printed out or digitally that you can type on that worksheet. But you're going to want to follow that worksheet uh, in order to take notes for today's lesson. When talking about the founding of St. Louis, there are three major characters that you will need to familiarize yourself and that will play major parts in the story of St. Louis, and that is Pierre Laclede, Auguste Chouteau, and then his mother, Madame Chouteau. And so when you think of the beginning of St. Louis, you need to know those three individuals. And so when we hear anything about Laclede in St. Louis, like Laclede's Landing or Laclede Gas or Laclede anything, that is pretty much named after Pierre Laclede. And then there are plenty of things also in the St. Louis area named after the Chouteau family, including Chouteau Avenue downtown, as well as some other institutions and places in the city. So let's go ahead and tackle the founding of St. Louis. So first off, let me go ahead and do a little quick bio of Pierre Laclede, and you're going to want to copy some of these notes on the upper left-hand corner where it says Pierre Laclede at the very top of the page. Pierre Laclede comes from France and moves to the United States in New Orleans in 1755, and that's one of the first things that you're going to want to take notes on. Why does he come to New Orleans? Because in America, that is basically the French destination. Yes, some went to New York and some went to Philadelphia, but most French came to New Orleans because that was the French city in the United States. And so he makes his way here pretty much around 25, 26 years old. When he gets here, he establishes a fur company with a friend named Gilbert Maxent, and they together establish the Maxent Laclede and Company Fur Company. So you're going to want to jot that down because that is going to play a major role throughout his life. He will be a fur trader. And so that is going to basically set himself on the road to and the story that we're going to be telling today. By 1762, or basically 7 years after he arrives in New Orleans, he will be given exclusive rights to trade with the Native Americans in New Orleans. Basically, anybody who wants to trade with the Native Americans in the Midwest has to go through Pierre Laclede. And so this is going to be a pretty obviously lucrative monopoly that he's going to have, which then makes the decision on why he leaves a little bit interesting. And so we'll get into that in just a second, but that's basically the breakdown of his early bio. And then a year later, he's going to either have to or want to leave New Orleans, potentially because of a scandal or potentially because he wants to move on to bigger and better things. And we'll let you sort of decide which one is which. Now we get to Auguste Chouteau. Now, for those of you who are taking notes here, you're going to want to jot down in that middle section where it says Auguste Chouteau at the top of your note page that at the time of this story, he is 14 years old. He is a freshman in high school. And so think back to your freshman year in high school. What the heck did you do anything notably of interest, of historic proportion as a freshman? And I would venture to guess that 99.9% of you absolutely did nothing historic, nothing consequential, other than surviving without getting shoved in a locker or beaten up or having your lunch money stolen. And so He is born to his mother, Madame Shoto, and his father, Rene Shoto. Now, Rene is a man's name back at this time. And he's either born in 1749 or 1750. Records sort of do both. And so we're not 100% sure of what year, but it's one of those 2 years. Um, Rene Shoto, his father, then decides to basically leave the family in New Orleans and head back to France. And we'll talk more about this story in a little bit, but basically it is not a happy marriage for the Shotos, and Auguste Shoto, being the child, probably witnessed a lot of family turmoil. The problem with Rene Shoto leaving is that the Catholic Church does not recognize divorce. And so even though Rene Shoto jumps on a ship and basically sails across the Atlantic, he is still married to Madame Shoto, even though they are thousands of miles apart from one another. And that is going to pose a potentially very big problem for Madame Shoto, which again we'll get into later. But jot this down, for the story that we are about to tell you. Auguste Shoto is going to basically be the right-hand man of Pierre Laclede in this upcoming story about the start of St. Louis. And why would you pick a 14-year-old to do that? The answer to that question is he is one of the few persons on this trip who know how to read and write. He's an educated man. And so therefore, Laclede is going to trust him. He's going to empower him because he's one of the few educated, literate people on this adventure. So, and we'll go into that they have a deeper connection here, which you will see in just a little bit. So the next series of information is going to be labeled as like an A, B, C, D. They have little points in there, and so I'll kind of give you highlights as to that section of notes as we go through them. So this whole story starts in August of 1763, and I think that's an answer on your notes. When does it begin? And the purpose is to start a new fur trading post. And so that's the answer as to why they leave or what's the purpose of the trip. It is to start a new fur trading post. So yesterday we talked about how some cities started off as Catholic missions. St. Louis is going to start off for an economic reason. And Laclede and Shoto are going to bring 30 men with them on this expedition. And so they leave New Orleans in August of 1763. They are going to travel up the Mississippi River. Why is that difficult? You guessed it, because you're going against the current when you're traveling up the Mississippi. And so that's going to make for some slow travel. But eventually they are going to arrive in St. Genevieve, Missouri, 3 months after they leave. And so if you do your math and your calendar addition correctly, August plus 3 means that you arrive in Missouri in November. And they arrive in St. Genevieve because it's the only French settlement on the west side of the Mississippi River, which is in charge of, or which is ruled by the French. So when they get to St. Genevieve, there is a problem. They can't stay there because they are too big of a group to live or find a place to stay in St. Genevieve. There are no Hiltons. There are no Holiday Inns. There are no Marriotts at this time in St. Genevieve. And so they are too big, and the town is too small to house their expedition party. However, somebody tells them that if they go upriver a little further, there is an old French abandoned fort that they could probably stay at and would be perfect for them. And so they decide to move to Fort Deschart, or just Fort Chart, for the winter. And that is, I believe, one of your answers as well. And so they are going to decide to basically winter at Fort Deschart or Fort Chart for the winter because things are starting to get cold and they don't want to be out in the open as things start to turn brutally cold. So this is the current spot of Fort Deschart. You can see here that the river has basically changed course a little bit. Fort Deschart used to be on the river, but as you can see, the river has sort of shifted to the south a little bit, and now you have this sort of marshy area right here. And then the Mississippi River is to the south of that. But back in the 1700s, the river would have been right around this area right here. And so you would have had Fort Deschart pretty close to the river banks. So that's probably what it was like when Laclede and Choteau arrived. This is an aerial view of Fort Deschart today, and you can see it is a fort. It has a wall around the encampment. You have barrack houses in the middle. You have some guard houses over here as well, and everything is behind the wall. And then here is your entrance right here. For those of you who are asking, is it still around today? Can I go visit it today? The answer is yes, you can. And so if you ever do, shoot me some pictures and send them my way. I would love to see what it looks like today. So in December, in the midst of winter, Laclede, he's no dummy, sends 14 or 15-year-old Choteau out to scout upriver for a potential site to start the fur trading post. And so Choteau and about 3 other men get in a canoe and basically travel just from Fort Deschart up the Mississippi River. They basically go past what is St. Louis today and travel to a spot where the Mississippi and Missouri meet together. And that is his aha moment. And so Choteau, knowing that the more rivers you have, the more animals you have, and the more animals you have, the more fur you have, says this is a great location. But the location where the Mississippi and Missouri meet is also a very marshy, wet area. That will not be a very good place to sustain a permanent location. So they travel back down from where the Mississippi and Missouri meet, and Choteau comes across this site. Now, obviously, he doesn't come across this exact site because that big arch-like thing wasn't there, but he basically comes to this location and he says, aha, this is perfect. There are 3 elements as to why this is a perfect location. And so this is going to be an answer on your question, and there is a section about what is so great about this place geographically. So number 1 reason why this is such a great area is because it is right along the Mississippi River. And so you want to be right along the river because obviously in this day and age, the river is the major highway system of any place. And so by being close to a river, you check that right off your list. And I really should have made that blue for water, but I wasn't thinking. Number 2, and the biggest thing is this. And so if you are standing underneath the arch right here, and you are looking out toward the river, where is the river located in regards to your location? And if you think about it, if you're standing under the arch looking over into Illinois, you know that the river is below you and a good element below you. That is because St. Louis is built on a bluff. Now, the bluff has been built up because of the arch grounds, but there was a 30-foot 30-ish bluff right there, and that 30-foot bluff was perfect because it would protect you from, at that time, what they thought would have been major flooding. And so number two, St. Louis is built on a bluff, and we know that this today, this bluff still exists and is pretty formidable. In the epic flood of 1993, in which I'm sure those of you who are listening to this were negative something years old, in 1993, St. Louis had the worst flood in its history. The Mississippi River will get to a record height of 49.5 feet, which is this area right here where the stairs are. There's actually three different set of stairs. The river gets up 1.5 of those three sets of stairs. And so it makes it about halfway up the stair system. But it still had another 1.5 to go. So even during its epic flood, the city of St. Louis was high and dry with the help of some flood walls down here and some help of some flood walls down here. But St. Louis is built on a bluff. So that is number two. And then the third really nice thing about it is that this bluff was all layered with walnut trees. And so those walnut trees would provide wood to start building what would become the encampment and the early beginnings of the trading post and eventually the city. So it basically had everything that they needed. It had access to water, it had protection from floods because of the bluff, and it had walnut trees. And so it was the perfect location. So it has a rocky bluff, it's covered with walnut trees, and so they marked the area, they laid claim to the area, and then they returned back to Laclede at Fort Deschartres with the news that they had found the perfect location. So Laclede and Choteau are going to spend the next months sort of planning things out on paper. And in order to do that, they have to rely on the one city that they are most familiar with, and that is New Orleans. And so the street plan that they take to develop this new marketplace village will be taken from their remembering of the street plans of New Orleans. And so if you go down to Laclede's Landing, which is not where they landed, it's just a little bit north of it. So the actual landing spot for St. Louis and for Laclede and Choteau was the Arch. The Arch grounds are the Arch grounds in part because that's where Choteau and Laclede start the city. Laclede's Landing, which is the bar and entertainment area, was just a fancy name to give for that little area. But the original streets that Choteau and Laclede build are still there in Laclede's Landing. So when you are walking on 1st Street and 2nd Street, that has been 1st Street and 2nd Street since literally day one. So there are 4 original streets that are still in Laclede's Landing from Choteau and Laclede. Later on tonight, you're going to read an article about why Choteau and Laclede decided to call it St. Louis after their favorite king, Louis IX, and the current king at their time, Louis XV, but it's really after Louis IX, and you'll read that article and learn a little bit more about him. So in February, all of the men except for Laclede, because he's no dummy, it's still cold outside, will travel up to the location and literally start clearing trees down so that they can prep the area to start building for their encampment. In early April, once the weather has warmed up nicely, Laclede will arrive, lay out the street plans and the housing arrangements, and start laying things out for the development of what will become St. Louis and the marketplace. So here's a little artist rendition of Laclede sort of laying things out and sort of telling people where to go and what to do. Here's another one of them clearing the trees and prepping the city. Now in this one you can see that the bluff is not as large as it is today, but it is still a bluff and it still gives them some protection from the river. There were 4 main streets In early St. Louis, as I said before, First and Second, and then Walnut, and then Market Street, which led to the fur market. The center of the village was obviously the marketplace where they were selling fur. Um, and so next they then developed a place for a church. That location is still a church today. It is the old cathedral. The old cathedral, which is literally about 100 yards from the arch, has been the site of a church since day one. And then Laclede's home, he's no dummy. He's going to set out his home first, pick the most prime piece of property. He will lay that out as well. By the end of April, they have several cabins built for the men. And then at this time, because he's done so much, Laclede is going to make Auguste Shoto his partner in this new venture. And anytime you become a partner in a business, you share the, that is correct, profits. And so now this 15-year-old is going to start reaping the benefits of this fur trade. And so at that time, Laclede and Shoto are going to send for Madame Shoto and Auguste's half-brother, Jean-Pierre, and some half-brother or half-sisters as well to come up to St. Louis. And so now I need to sort of backtrack a little bit, and we need to fill in the story of Madame Shoto. And so this is Madame Shoto, but before I get going here, when I tell this story, I forgot to preface the story with what does Madame Shoto, Pierre Laclede, and a Kanye West song have in common? And so you're going to see the answer to that question. The women who are listening to this may not be very happy with that question, but the men will understand what I'm coming from here when we get through this. So Madame Shoto, born in New Orleans in 1733, her father dies when she is 6 years old. She is one of 3 children. I believe she's the oldest, so she has to take care of her younger siblings, so she doesn't have much of a childhood. She is pretty much the caregiver right away. So because of that, she marries relatively early, I want to say 13 or 14 years old, to a bar owner named Rene Shoto. And as we discussed before, they are going to have a pretty rocky marriage. Rocky in the sense that she was physically beaten and probably emotionally beaten in the course of their marriage. She was regularly beaten so much that she would never take a picture with her right cheek in front or toward the artist. She always had her left cheek as the prominent side. And the reason why is because during their marriage, Rene Shoto hit her so hard on the right cheek that he actually broke her cheek, and she walked the rest of her life with an indentation in her right cheek. He basically had broken her cheekbone, and because it's the 1700s, they don't have facial plastic surgery back then. And so she literally walked around for the rest of her life with an indented right cheek where he had basically broken it. So when he leaves to go back to Paris, France, and basically leaves her and her son, Auguste Shoto, behind, they are basically going to not be that upset, except for the fact that she now has no husband and no form of income. And back in this time period, women did not have very many opportunities for jobs. She could have been a prostitute. She was never going to do that. She could have been a maid. She was not going to do that. And so it just so happens that around this time period, she ends up meeting Auguste or Pierre Laclede, who was a prominent fur trader, had some money to his name. And so this is where I now bring in the Kanye West song. Can you guess which one I'm talking about? That is correct if you said gold digger. And so some would see her as a gold digger, that she is going to hook up with the first person who provides her with a sense of economic stability. I am most assuredly thinking that there was actually more to their relationship. They will actually spend the rest of their lives together. So I'm sure that they were deeply in love. And in fact, when she is called to come to St. Louis, uh, even though she is not technically married to him, they have four children together. Now, those children are considered bastard children. They were born out of wedlock, which then leads some credence to the possibility that they decided to leave New Orleans because their relation was somewhat scandalous in that she was still married to Rene Choteau, and yet they are having children together, and they are not technically married as it's connected with the Catholic Church. And so uh, that is the connection to the Choteaus and the Lacledes. So when she comes to St. Louis, she will eventually attain the nickname and title of Queen of St. Louis. And this is what I want you to jot down at the very top of your paper under Madame Choteau. You're going to jot down that she is known as the Queen of St. Louis over the course of the remainder of her lifetime, because she will basically create the social elements of early St. Louis life. Once St. Louis starts to grow as a city, she will be sort of the queen of the social scene, hosting parties for the upper class and whatnot. And she will be the head of the largest family in the city of St. Louis. By the time that she dies, she has well over 100 children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren if you add them up all together when she dies. So it is by far the largest family in St. Louis. This is her gravesite in Calvary Cemetery in St. Louis. We will be seeing this cemetery and this gravesite later on in this course. And so to wrap up this story, Pierre Laclede, and by the way, St. Louis was started in 1764, so about 14 years later, Pierre Laclede is making his way to New Orleans and then back home from New Orleans on a business trip. And somewhere on the way back home, we think somewhere around Arkansas, he becomes sick and dies somewhere in the state of Arkansas. His remains are not brought back to St. Louis. He's just buried basically out in the wilderness. And so he dies at age 54, unmarked grave. And so to honor him in St. Louis, there is a statue of Laclede behind City Hall. Basically, if you stand at the corner of Market and Tucker, that is City Hall, and if you go to the west side of City Hall, you will see this statue. This is the statue of Laclede. This is City Hall right here. This is the statue of Laclede. It's the only statue of Pierre Laclede in the city of St. Louis, and so that is how we honor Laclede today. For Choteau, at the very bottom of your worksheet, you've got a little bit extra biography section. I want you to write down everything in blue. This is what he does the remainder of his life in St. Louis. He becomes basically the head honcho of early St. Louis history. After Laclede dies, he will be elected to the City Board of Trustees, which is one of the first governments in the city of St. Louis. Later, he becomes a member of the Missouri Territory Council when Missouri starts to apply for statehood. He runs for mayor of St. Louis to be the first mayor of St. Louis and loses. We'll explain that later on in the course why. He will also get into banking and develop the first Bank of St. Louis and the Bank of Missouri. Oh, and by the way, he's still running his fur company until 1816. So you're going to want to pause and jot that down. This is his gravesite in Calvary Cemetery as well. The headstone that you see here is not original. It has been replaced recently because the original one had just been becoming so decrepit. And then one of his half brothers, so this is the oldest child of Auguste Chouteau of Madame Chouteau and Pierre Laclede. So this is the first bastard child. There will be one son, him, and then three other girls. And so he comes up, Pierre Chouteau comes up, um, and then he becomes another bigwig in St. Louis, and you'll jot down these 3 bullet points for him. Elected to the City Board of Trustees, will become an Indian agent for the area so that he negotiates with the Native American population, and he will also run for mayor and lose as well, and then dies at the age of 91 because of the great cholera epidemic, which we will be studying later on here in the course. And then I'm going to have you guys look up and report back the Battle of Fort San Carlos. This was one of the earliest military fortifications in the St. Louis area. There is a plaque where this fort stood. Basically, here is Busch Stadium, where you saw that fort was right here. There was a giant wall that went around the city of St. Louis. This would have been the city of St. Louis, and that wall and entrenchment would have protected them against the Native Americans back in the day. We'll talk more about Chouteau's Pond, but go ahead and you're going to look up the Battle of St. Louis and its importance along with Fort San Carlos and report back to the teacher what you learned about why that battle happened and what was the outcome of that battle. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed. And now you know a little bit more about why St. Louis was started. See you later.